And here's Tom Pelissero, Minnesotan Tom Pelissero with NFL Network. Nice enough to stop by the Vikings/KFAN table. So now we have you. Well, NFL Network has you and has Jamie Erdahl. I mean, it's kind of a state of Minnesota takeover here, Tommy.
It's not bad. Yeah, we did a show together, or a couple of shows last summer, and having us both in studio. I remember Jamie when she was interning at a radio station up in Minnesota 13 years ago.
Really?
As a young up-and-comer, and now seeing her on the
which station was that?
Fun. Not this one.
It wasn't AM 1130?
It's one that I don't think exists anymore.
Oh,
At least
I
none
see.
Of the people exist.
Oh, she interned over there? I didn't know that.
She was over there.
Wow.
Very briefly.
So right after she went to, what was it, Breck or Blake? One of the two.
She was in college, I believe.
Oh, I
right,
see.
And on her way out. Really, though, sitting next to you, I feel like this is Vikings Uncensored 20 years ago.
Wait, did you do that show with me with Chris Hovan?
You were very – oh, yes.
Do you remember that? And I don't know what –
he showed up with like a 60-ounce beer.
Okay.
And
he
had
slurred
been,
his speech.
Perhaps was not – yes, and we got a few phone calls, I believe, and then he improved over the course of the show.
Wow.
But that was a trip. Oh, yeah.
That was unbelievable. That's where I met Irv Cross. And this is years before – it was like 2 years before I and anybody knew that I would be doing Vikings play-by-play, because this job is my first play-by-play job at any level. So Irv, when I was practicing games in 2000 at the Metrodome for Vikings.com, I told him about it, and so he came in, one Vikings Uncensored, with this depth chart, this game-calling depth chart that he must have had from 1950. I mean, and it's like, and I still use that format to this day, writing stuff down as opposed to going the route of PowerPoint or whatever you would do on the computer to generate the names and the info and stuff. I still write it down like Irv taught me, man. And that was Vikings Uncensored at the former Joe Censors in Bloomington.
And you were kind enough in 2004, my second year at KFAN, to invite me to do that show with you on Monday nights. So. I remember Chris Hovan, Darren Bennett, Jermaine Wiggins. I mean, some classic names from the past, but a lot of fun there back then.
That's fantastic, man. Well, your work speaks for itself at NFL Network. Your ascension, as I've said to you off the microphone many times, I'm just very happy with it, just to see, over the course of the last decade and a half and everything through was it Press Gazette, Green Bay?
Green Bay Press Gazette,
yeah.
And then back into Minneapolis, and then to USA Today, and now NFL Network.
USA Today, that's right.
I appreciate you.
So with NFL Network, we will see you in, your workroom or whatever at home. We'll see you at stadiums or Indianapolis and all that. But when you get an opportunity to do desk work in Culver City, do you really enjoy that? Because I really enjoy watching you do that and get to see kind of a different side of you.
I love it, doing Good Morning Football out in New York with Jamie and company. Rich Eisen's had me fill in on his show out there a number of different times too. It's cool. It is a different experience. I always tell people, when I'm actually in studio, it feels like I'm really on TV. Where the rest of the time, you got to understand, that studio, they built it out. It looks fantastic. They designed it. This is all pre-COVID times. They just wanted me to have the studio in the house.
Yeah.
But I'm walking downstairs. I'm wearing sweats from the waist down. My wife sometimes is on the Peloton on the other side of the wall, like 8 feet away, so I can hear Kendall Toole yelling at her, "Go faster, go faster."
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to spit out something about the Jaguars depth chart. It's a different type of a deal. I love doing that, but the whole thing's cool.
So you break news, you report, and you also will opine occasionally. So you're covering more ground than Lewis and Clark with what you do for NFL Network. Now, when you're in Indianapolis for the Combine, is this draft centric for you, or is it draft, Darkness, and A-Raj, and Daniel Schneider selling his team?
It's really all the other stuff. It is this month. Everybody always thinks, the Super Bowl. I get that question I have for years. Just what do you do in the offseason? This month after the Super Bowl is the most bonkers time of the entire year. And that really goes back the last several years, specifically last year, where there were so many trades of high-profile players, Pro Bowl players. I think there were 10 Pro Bowl players traded in like a 2-week span last year. When that's happening, that's upended the entire paradigm of the NFL, because you remember 10, 15, 20 years ago, there weren't trades. you'd maybe get one here or there, but there weren't these massive trades all the time. And it's a younger generation of general managers.
And then Kwesi rolled around.
Looks at things differently. Kwesi comes in. He's trading with division rivals, and he's trading like an exchange of 9 different draft picks for T.J. Hawkinson.
Well, look at this table here. The one behind us is the Detroit Lions table. So he sat down right after I taped an interview with him, and Kwesi was doing a podcast from that table. And I'm like, seriously, can you do anything else with the Detroit Lions? I mean, we got the Dolphins, the Broncos, the Jags table over there. Does everything have to be with the Lions, man?
We'll see how Jameson Williams is.
Yeah.
Kwesi will never hear the end of that if Jameson Williams ends up being a superstar over there. But I get it. His world is the quantitative universe. It's about maximizing your value in all sorts of things. That T.J. Hawkinson trade worked out great for everybody. Lions got equivalent of a second-round pick. The Vikings get a guy who was as productive as any tight end this side of Travis Kelce in the NFL over the last half of the season here. And I think that does make it fun. Not that his predecessor, Rick Spielman, is over here doing work at CBS. Not that he didn't make plenty of trades too, but Kwesi's just not afraid to trade with anyone if it's the right type of deal, and he's entering a really fascinating offseason right now.
Now, the 2022 Minnesota Vikings, 13 wins. And the narrative more so nationwide than locally, and it was there locally, is that the way they were winning and that it wouldn't sustain, and they were kind of like the NFL's favorite frauds. And O'Connell not being up for Coach of the Year kind of played into that too. And I'm still flabbergasted Brian Daboll won it with the third-place team, but we could talk about that later. Just overall, how did you see the 2022?
I saw a lot of Vikings games through the course of that season, covering them for NFL Network. And I would say Kevin O'Connell came in with the idea that, listen, you can't fix everything roster-wise. You're not in year one going to have everything the way that you want it. And so on defense, they had a bunch of older players.
Yeah.
On offense, you maybe had some guys who fit in better than others, and some of those guys won't be back in 2023. But what they were good at was situational football. It was 2-minute, it was red zone, it was short yardage. And you look at the numbers, they were good in those categories. When you got down late in games, they wanted to win those games. Those were games they lost in the past.
Yeah.
So they're really good in that. But I also understand you sit back and 3.5 quarters of the game and you're going, this is brutal at times. Why can't they just sustain consistent offense? Why are the offenses that they're going against going up and down the field on that defense no matter what they try? But they won 13 games.
Yeah.
You can't overlook that, with Kirk Cousins as their quarterback, with one of the worst defenses in the league. And so you change it out this year. You bring in Brian Flores. There's probably going to be some older parts on that defense who are not returning. There's going to be some parts on the offense who are not returning. The arrow's still pointing up on the Vikings in terms of programmatically. Does that mean they're going to win more games, go deeper in the playoffs in 2023? That depends in large part on what Kwesi, who remember came in with the talk of the competitive rebuild, for an ownership group in the Wilfs who spend a lot of money. They put a lot of resources into the roster. They always have one of the highest cash payrolls over time in the NFL. They also don't like to go full rebuild mode.
Yeah.
So I would not anticipate that this is a completely tear it down. But you may have a transition here just because if you're going to move on from some older players, you're not going to replace them with other veterans just because that's how you get your salary cap upside down.
Now, I saw a tweet of yours. This is Tom Pelissero, a Minnesotan, used to do work with KFAN, and follow him on Twitter at Tom Pelissero, S-E-R-O at the end, as 9 to Noon does, about Brian Gutekunst, beloved Goody, GM for the Packers, sitting down with the assembled beat writers, Domofsky and just the rest of the group, for 30 minutes. And I misread your tweet. And then you came over here, we were chatting a little bit, and his podium work here at the Scouting Combine was 7 minutes.
7 minutes.
Well, how does that happen? I mean, why?
So he walked up. It was actually, credit to Jason Wallers, who's their head of media relations over there, for putting the beat writer stuff first. So then in the walk from the hotel, to him being up on the podium, every quote's out there.
Yeah.
Everything that he was going to say is already there. So Goody walks up to the podium and goes, hey, like I was saying before, haven't talked to Aaron, no decisions there, so anything else you got?
Yeah.
And 7 minutes later it was, all right, no more questions?
Wow.
And we're done.
Right.
So I saw Kwesi in the hall after.
Wow.
I said, if I were placing money on this, and of course I don't gamble as an NFL employee, but if I were, I would not have bet on you to speak 3 times as long as Goody at the podium today, but here we are.
Right. So is Aaron, in essence, holding this team hostage? Or is it too early in the equation to say that?
That's what I was going to say is, at this stage, no. If we get to the week before free agency and there's still not an answer there, then to a degree, he's tying their hands. It wouldn't be the first time. If you look back, in recent years here, there have been a bunch of different situations where the Packers have had to wait for Aaron Rodgers, and at times that's created some challenges for them. So, the ball is in Aaron's court here. He's due $60 million almost in 2023. It's fully guaranteed. If he comes to them and says, I want to play, then it's going to be a matter of, all right, do you want to play here? If so, we got to talk through all the scenarios in terms of what we're thinking with the roster. Here's the way it's going to be. Does our vision line up here? If he says, I want to play someplace else, then they're open to moving on from him. But he's got to make the first move. They can't unilaterally trade him because, for one thing, he could just not show up. He could say, I'm retiring, I'm out. Also, that he would have to restructure his contract. Either way, if he plays anywhere, he's got to rework his contract to help the Packers cap, whether to facilitate a trade or if he comes back there to Green Bay.
Yeah.
So unless he signs that restructure, there's nothing they can do, and they can't move on from him.
Right.
So it's a situation where, they, a year ago, if you go back, they signed him to this 3-year, depending how you do the numbers, $150 million plus contract with full guarantees. You're anticipating at least we're buying 2 years here without the drama.
Yep.
And then you get off to a bad start in the season. Aaron's banged up, doesn't play his best. Roster's got a bunch of different challenges, not in sync with the receivers, and it's sort of a lost season, even though they made it interesting at the end there. And now you get into the same mode, speculating about the future. He goes on a 4-day darkness retreat. He's on Pat McAfee every week. It's what the Packers signed up for, and frankly, it's what the next team, if he decides to get himself traded, is also signing up for.
Yeah.
It's a year-by-year thing. It's all the drama that comes with it. He's still a really good player. There are flashes there of that Aaron Rodgers, and you might be thinking we can capture that for one more year. But you're very much inheriting everything that comes with Aaron Rodgers. And if it's a one-year type of a thing, how much are you willing to give up in a trade?
Do you think it's even a 1% chance that he stays because in other words, I don't necessarily think Aaron is enamored with being in Green Bay anymore, but he's enamored with that money. That what he will get there with what he knows is right in front of him. So if they can't, say they can't work anything out and he's going to be there, any chance he backs up Love?
No.
None, right?
I see zero scenario
Yeah.
that he'd sooner walk away. Now, he hasn't told me that directly.
Right.
I don't want to make assumptions here.
Right.
But at that number, there's simply no way.
Yeah.
I don't see a quarterback competition. I think that it is very much if he wants to play, they'll wait as long as they have to. They will try to facilitate a trade. If they don't get what they think is a fair offer for him, they'll wait. But remember, it has cap implications, too. You got to get that contract off the books. It's the same reason they did the Devontae Adams trade when they did it last year.
Good point.
So there's a lot of interconnected parts here. They don't have as many of their own free agents right now as they did last year when they wanted to get some deals done. So they've got time, but anytime you got a $60 million rock sitting on your cap, it does create challenges.
Yeah, I didn't formulate the question the right way because what I'm getting at is, I'm certainly not speaking for Matt LaFleur, but if you're Matt, well, you want to get your hands on Jordan because everything you're working on in the offseason and through training camp and during the season, that kid's going to run. Now, when it's 12 and you put something in, you don't know if it's going to be run. He might change it, play after play after play after play after play.
OTAs are voluntary, but when you don't show up for them, like last year, and you got all new receiving core, and then week 1 in Minnesota, you have a deep ball clang off the hands of Christian Watson, and then on third down, Romeo Doubs cuts out, and you throw the in, and you throw your hands up in the air. That's the stuff you'd normally be working on. That's not a criticism of Aaron Rodgers. It's just the reality of the situation. He's got other things going on in his life. Tom Brady got to a certain point. I'm not doing OTAs anymore. I'm going to be with my family. Aaron's got a variety of different interests in his life.
Yeah.
It does make an impact, though. In terms of what Matt LaFleur wants, I would just say this. There's always a difference between personnel and coaching. Personnel is always looking to the future. Coaching's thinking at a very gut level, who helps me win right now?
Right.
Jordan Love showed in Philadelphia what he can do. You've seen him every day in practice. There's certainly a level of belief there. And the next step for him, as Goody keeps saying, is to play. But if you got to suit up right now and try to win one game, it's hard to argue against the 4-time NFL MVP, Aaron Rodgers.
Tommy, do you think there's merit to the Bears moving number 1? And do you think anybody would want it?
You never want to be drafting number 1. There's a limited number of times you're ever going to be in that position. So you'd be doing organizational malpractice not to have a scenario for everything. Do they ultimately try to trade the pick? Yeah, unless they become totally convinced that one of these quarterbacks can be better than what they have in Justin Fields.
Right.
But that's every team that's ever had the number one pick and not had an urgent quarterback need. Unless there's a transcendent player at another position, you're always thinking we'd love to move back. And it's not the old pre-CBA system where it was the astronomical Sam Bradford $70+ million in guarantees anymore. These are actually affordable types of contracts. But you're still talking about giving up major capital. If you're the Bears and you want to trade out of that pick, what you need to do is make people believe the Texans are going to take the quarterback you want.
Right.
You got to get above the Texans. Or make the Texans think, we're going to trade with somebody behind you, so you got to move up from 2 to 1.
Yeah.
That's the environment they've got to try to create. And I've had a variety of conversations with scouts around here. This can change through the course of the process, but there's not that one off-the-charts, Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney type of this is clearly the guy. Will Anderson from Alabama, really good player. He's going to work out here. Jalen Carter from Georgia, the defensive tackle. There's a lot for teams to dig into there. He's not going to work out here, but he's another one in that mix. Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech, the edge player, another one you're going to hear about. He's not yet ready yet, a couple of broken bones in his foot. He'll do his pro day. But he's one of those guys so far above that somebody's going to trade up for a non-quarterback.
Yeah.
And do you feel comfortable taking that guy at number 1? The Bears have a lot of things they need to accomplish. They've got extra draft picks. They've got close to $100 million in cap space. This is not necessarily the free agent class to spend that type of cap space. If you just look at the names, who's going to be coming off with franchise tags. So, yeah, you'd love to trade back and get a few picks, but that requires somebody to be willing to give up a boatload to come up. If you get stuck at number 1, are you absolutely convinced Justin Fields is going to be better than each of these quarterbacks?
Yeah.
That's the stuff that Ryan Poles and company have to work through.
What do you think or know is next for the Vikings and Kirk Cousins?
So there were some tweets going around yesterday claiming that I said something on TV that I didn't really say, which was that the Vikings aren't interested in a 1-year extension with Kirk Cousins. Definitely didn't say that. Something got twisted. Game of telephone here. I would just say this. There's a few different options here with Kirk Cousins. You could do a 1-year extension, which is what they did last year. I don't think, my opinion, that makes a lot of sense to do at this point. So do you do a longer-term type of an extension, or does Kirk just play it out for $30 million? That's what they've got to work through here. Is there an extension that makes sense for all parties here? If not, does Kirk just play out the deal?
Yeah.
That's what they've got to figure out. And macro, big picture, and Kwesi talked about it again today, that Kirk meets that minimum threshold. He was using, like, big mathematical terms I don't entirely understand. But basically he was saying Kirk Cousins is above the line.
Yeah.
You can win with Kirk Cousins. They won 13 games with him last year.
Yep.
You can't overlook that. For whatever people have this conception of Kirk Cousins, they won a lot of games with him. But in the big picture, do they feel like they need to keep their options open to potentially, you look at the 2024 quarterback class already. Do you want to extend Kirk Cousins and take yourself out of the mix of potentially drafting one of those guys? All those things have to play into the process here. There's a lot of reasons to believe in Kirk Cousins. He'll be starting somewhere this year and playing really well. Right now, you'd say that's going to be in Minnesota. But those are all things that they've got to work through because you got decisions to make on Adam Thielen and Harrison Smith, potentially Eric Kendricks or Jordan Hicks. You got to figure out what to do with Daniil. They'd like to extend him. It's a really unique deal to do
Both
because of how
Dalvins.
they moved all the money up.
Tomlinson, free agent. Cook, a lot of money.
They pushed Tomlinson back, the void date on his contract, to try to work something out. Dalvin Cook, I'd be surprised if he's not a Viking. He's got $2 million that comes fully guaranteed next week. He's coming off shoulder surgery, so that money's locked in already.
Great point.
I would anticipate that he's absolutely on the team. But, yeah, you've got to figure some things out. There's going to be some guys who are probably approached about pay cuts, restructures. Veterans at a certain age have to make those decisions. Do I take that money? Do I want to go experience something else? Last year it was a lot of the same roster if you go back. Obviously, they made the Hawkinson trade. The draft class, obviously it's from unfortunate circumstances with Lewis Cine and whatnot, but it wasn't like a high-impact initial rookie year for the draft class. So this could be the year where all of a sudden it's a lot of new faces. And, again, I would just go back to you won 13 games. You went into the playoffs. You easily, if late game situation goes differently there, you could have won like you won all those regular season games as well. But there are positions where you need to get younger and that you have a lot of money tied up. The roster is going to look different in 2023, and they've got to figure out how all those pieces fit together.
Lastly, Kevin Stefanski will join tomorrow. So Stefanski's Browns, with Watson getting a full offseason, and obviously will be better served to perform at a higher level than he was this last season. But what do you think of Kevin's lot in life with the Cleveland Browns?
I mean, Kevin's last year was in a really tough spot because you had the entire situation playing out with Baker Mayfield, who was banged up in 2021. He wanted to, it was pretty clear after they had the dalliance with Deshaun Watson that Baker wanted to move on. Mm-hmm. They had to find the path forward on that. Deshaun Watson comes in. There's serious allegations of sexual misconduct. You give up an unprecedented trade package, unprecedented money to get him, but it's a guy who hadn't played by the time he got on the field in December in like 2 years.
Yeah.
He hadn't played since I think it was January 1st, 2021. Hadn't played a game in that long other than one throwaway series or two throwaway series in a preseason game. So let's see through the course of this offseason and into the season what Deshaun Watson looks like. If he doesn't play well, that's going to be a lot of people whose necks are on the line.
Yep.
Andrew Berry, Kevin Stefanski, everybody. And Jimmy Haslam's a big part of that decision too, being willing to roll out a contract that frankly ticked off all the other teams because nobody wants to be doing fully guaranteed contracts, and they did it because they were told they were out, and that was the only way they were going to get him. He's our guy Drew Petzing is out of there now. He's down in Arizona as the offensive coordinator, so there's some staff turnover as well. Mm-hmm. They swapped out the defensive coordinator. I think that they're in a pretty good position. They've got star power on that team. They got to make it a cohesive unit. That's been an issue. If Deshaun Watson plays at the level that we've seen in his Houston days, they've got the opportunity to be pretty good. But the Bengals are also in that division, and that's going to be a good football team for a long time. We'll see what happens with Lamar in Baltimore. But you're going to contend with the Ravens. They're always there. The Steelers going through a transition period here, but you would think Kenny Pickett, year 2, if he stays healthy, stays on the field, they're going to have the opportunity to compete as well. It's a hard division, man. That's a tricky division. But, obviously Stefanski had a vision for how some things needed to change. Mike Prefer being out of there as well. They're bringing Bubba Ventrone, who's well-respected within the league. They're going to be doing a lot of things a little bit differently this year.
Got a minute to close, and you got me excited with a tweet. I don't even know when you tweeted it. It might have been today or yesterday. Kansas State cornerback Julius Brents. So I went and watched some highlights of his after I saw your tweet. I'd never heard of him. And the arms indeed go from Maui to Maine, and it just seems like somebody who could really help the Minnesota Vikings and plays like the way Flores wants to play. Is that fair?
Julius Brents is almost 6'4". He's got, apparently, I was told, a 6'11" wingspan,
Jeez.
Which is enormous. It's basically a 7-footer, like an NBA-style guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's going to come out here, and I'm always careful, PA, about making any prediction about what guys are going to do. But just being familiar with his training, he's probably going to jump like 40 inches vertical. He's going to have like a 7.7 broad jump, and he might run 4.3 something.
Come on.
So that
that's
guy,
top 10.
That guy is going to go. I mean, he potentially go second round.
Yeah.
He's going to go higher than everybody thinks. But we thought that with Tariq Woolen last year.
Yep.
Again, very long, levered guy, tall, extremely fast. He fell to the 5th. It was Rookie of the Year candidate. I don't know what happens with Julius Brents, but absolutely, that's an intriguing type of piece.
You're awesome, man. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
buddy. Thanks
I appreciate
for
you.
having me.